Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is Kirk Everson, the Principal and Government Intelligence Automation Leader at KPMG. Kirk, welcome to the discussion today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Let me say a little context for our conversation. A recent report from the Robotics Process Automation Community of Practice in the government highlights the impact of the technology over the last few years. In 2020 alone, the report says RPA program maturity increased significantly, with the number of automations deployed across government increasing by 110%, and the number of annualized hours of capacity created increasing by 195%. Last year alone, agencies deployed 460 automations, which is expected to save more than 848,000 hours. The paper says this growth demonstrates that programs have matured and increased their functional capacity, which means automation tools became more impactful and therefore increased the demand for these software solutions. Overwhelmingly, the CFO office is using automation to save time. Some 49% of all implementations came from that group. But acquisition, administrative, and IT were all in double digits as well, showing just how success travels. So how can agencies continue to take advantage of automation and similar tools to move away from manual and low-value work? Well, that's where my guest comes in. Once again, my guest is Kirk Everson, the Principal and Government Intelligent Automation Leader at KPMG. A lot of news from that recent report from the community of practice, and it's all good news. So talk to me a little bit about the trends we're seeing in intelligent automation. And obviously we're going to talk here about maybe some hyper automation, low code, no code, APIs, all the buzzwords that seem to be coming up.
Yeah, Jason, I think that report was very timely. I think if you look at, even as recently as 2 years ago, a lot of agencies were still kind of scratching their heads about, what is this technology? How do I procure it? How can it benefit me? And I think a lot of those questions have been answered for the most part. Agencies are much more comfortable with the tools and capabilities that intelligent automation can bring to them. And so, some of the trends that we're seeing are agencies are less inclined to just do, one or two proofs of concept to prove out the technology. Now that they know it works, a lot of agencies are looking to others for lessons learned and implementing RPA programs that are a little bit more robust. And by robust, I mean more enterprise-wide. Your stat around, a lot of the automations starting in the finance and accounting area is what we're seeing too, because the processes are pretty well defined and the data is structured. But I think, agencies are looking beyond RPA as well. And, the whole idea of hyper automation is starting to come into the vernacular of a lot of agencies. And what I mean by hyper automation is, you look at RPA as definitely a stepping stone to AI, but many of these automation platforms are starting to integrate other more advanced capabilities. For example, some of the low-code platforms, many of whom are already in production at federal agencies, are starting to incorporate RPA inherently in their platforms. The other things that the RPA vendors are doing is they're starting to enable APIs to more advanced AI and ML solutions within their platforms. So it makes it much simpler for a government agency who's implementing one of these platforms to tap into what I'll call democratized AI. And so you don't need, an army of data scientists to build you machine learning algorithms in Python. You can leverage, the APIs within these automation platforms to really stretch the capabilities and the objectives that you're trying to meet from a mission perspective. So that's where I think a lot of agencies are going to have to go to really achieve some of the more advanced automation solutions that they're getting to. The other point I'll bring up is there's also the idea of setting a governance structure. A lot of agencies have been past the POC, they've been past the pilot, they're starting to scale with additional automations, but then they realize, well, we've got to put some structure in place to manage this. One agency that we're working with in the DoD, did that exact thing. They started to stand up a number of automations. There was a lot of excitement from not only the program side of the house, but from the back office side of the house to really implement this at scale. And so what they had to do was take a step back and say, wait a minute, this is going to get unwieldy if we don't put some governance and around this. And so we've helped them stand up a kind of a digital center of excellence to help manage ingest, demand management, cost recovery, staffing, all the project management, all those sorts of things, because it in essence becomes a program. And then I guess the final trend I'll bring up is, some agencies have started with RPA, but then it kind of stalled. The proof of concept was developed, there was value given, but for whatever reason, whether it was lack of an executive evangelist, whether it was other priorities, it kind of stalled. And so what I'll call the intelligent automation deployment redux, where we're coming in and kind of helping agencies reinvigorate their original intent to stand up an automation program. So those are probably the biggest trends we're seeing more recently. And I think what's exciting, again, is agencies are getting smarter on how they implement some of these solutions.
I want to go back to one thing you said about the governance piece and setting up the COEs, the Centers of Excellence. One of the trends I saw in the RPA, State of RPA and Government report, was that a lot of this is moving to that broader viewpoint. Is that just natural progression that we see of technologies? First, you dip your toe in, then you get a little deeper. Then once you're about knee deep, you're all in at that point, and you really need that management. You're going to get wet, so you might as well, have a way to get wet, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, my analogy may be off a little bit.
Well, no, I think that's right. I mean, our initial conversations when we started talking about intelligent automation 4 or 5 years ago to government agencies was, what is it? I hear the term bot, that scares me. I don't like it. I'm concerned. But now that agencies are more comfortable with it, they're embracing it much faster. And in order to manage that velocity, you really need to, allow for, I'll call it a governance wrapper and a program around it. The biggest thing that governance does, besides managing the demand and the rollout and management of automations and advanced capabilities around AI, is also the stakeholders. Many governance structures that we're implementing and we're seeing are essentially bringing in either existing agency infrastructure, existing change boards, but they're enabling them with this additional capability. So you're making sure that the CIO, the CISO, the programs, deputy directors, they're all involved in the conversation so that there are no surprises. I think one of the early lessons learned from RPA, that piece of automation, was that a lot of the business side of the house, the programs, the non-IT functions, were starting to experiment in some cases without the knowledge of the CIO. And that kind of came back and bit them. So what this governance process does is, okay, you're scaling. We got to make sure we have the right infrastructure. We got to make sure we have the right security. We got to make sure we have the right, evangelists in place to help us, bring this to the enterprise. And so it's also an enabler as well as a control function.
The other piece of this that I just want to touch upon from a trend perspective is the democratization of data. I hear that term quite often. You don't all of a sudden need this advanced degree, this idea of, well, we have to go hire, as you said, a team of data scientists. Almost anyone, because of the APIs, because of the ability to set this up, the tools set up in such a way that you, whomever, could go in and go, I want to do it this way or set up a bot that way. Walk me through a little bit about how that's what you're seeing from your agency customers, about how the average person can then move into the intelligent automation world.
Well, to your point about the democratization of these capabilities, a lot of the vendors, whether they're RPA, low code, and by the way, those are converging. If you look at the Forrester and Gartner studies, they want to be able to provide an easy way to configure these solutions. And so what most of them, if not all of them, have done is implemented kind of this object-oriented development where, if you're used to, frankly, clicking and dragging and building process flows and enabling these tools in a way that you're not sitting there, in a code session for 18 hours straight. That's what they want to get to, because they understand that that's the quickest way that they're going to get adoption across the federal government. For me, what I look for when I try to deliver on an automation project and I'm bringing people in are folks that have an understanding of technology. I think that's a must, but they don't necessarily need to have PhDs in mathematics or data science. They need to just understand how processes work and how the capabilities work and have an overall understanding of technology and architecture. So it really broadens the aperture of those that can facilitate and deliver on these tools, which is great. Now, I don't want to oversimplify. You can't pull someone off the street and just say, go ahead and implement these tools. You do need the expertise, but it's the barrier to entry is much lower for someone who's got a background that makes sense to deliver these tools. And so that's really the benefit. And again, with these APIs, as you mentioned, I can pull in a very quick machine learning algorithm just based upon what's already been predetermined from the vendor, and allow for example, natural language processing of a contract, right? I can pull in an NLP algorithm to go ahead and read a document and extract certain things from that document without leaving the low code or the RPA platform. So it's really powerful.
One of the things we've seen over the last 6-9 months with the pandemic is this urgency, the need to kind of change the way agencies do business. How has automation really kind of played a bigger role in that urgency and that need to improve citizen and customer services?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increased need in digital transformation with the pandemic. I think one of the things that agencies are trying to do with folks working from home is, and some agencies have to have folks in the office to do certain things just because of the way the business processes are oriented. So we're seeing trends where, we want our workers when they're in the office to be as most efficient as they can. So one example, we're working with a local government agency to essentially make sure that for claims processing of unemployment, that the folks that are in the office can be most efficient and use automation to triage a lot of the emails coming in to help process the backlog of claims, so that when they're there, all the queues are ready, all the reviews are ready, everything's triaged, so they can be as efficient as they can. The other thing that we're seeing is, since most folks are working from home, you think about, well, I got to go to the filing cabinet and pull that file, and I got to review it. There's more demand for workflow. There's more demand for electronic document ingest, so that folks at home don't have to go over to the filing cabinet and pull out a file. They can review documents, they can review claims, they can review certain workflow-enabled items through a digital platform that allows them more flexibility from working from home. So I think that's the other trend. And then finally, we're seeing the use of automation, specifically RPA, I'll say, to increase the extensibility of legacy IT. One example, we helped a federal agency who was still using a very much a legacy mainframe system, but they had to find a way to. It was a very simple concept in theory, but it was hard because it was a mainframe system. They had to, for those frontline healthcare workers, somehow indicate in their payroll that they were now eligible for hazard pay. Well, to do that in the mainframe environment was very manual. I mean, you had to literally tab through a number of different fields to get to the right indicator, to then click on the hazard pay indicator. Well, we implemented automation to essentially enable the workforce to get the pay that they needed for those critical functions. So getting more out of that legacy system through these kind of overlays of digital capabilities has been another way that COVID has gotten us to be more creative in our use cases.
Two excellent examples, because I think those are real life. Hey, it's not just, hey, let's use automation and do it. It's, here's ways to do it, and it actually shows promise and shows impact. Kirk, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our discussion. You're listening to The Discussion, Modern Government, Emerging Trends in Intelligent Automation in a Time of Rapid Change, sponsored by KPMG on Federal News Network.